Greetings, my fellow internal auditors. This is Harold Silverman, the Managing Director of CA Services at the IA. Today I'm joined by Nelson Louise. Nelson is a principal with Eisner-Amper LLP's Forensic Litigation and Valuation Services practice. He has extensive global experience advising clients on complex domestic and cross-border forensic and litigation support matters. He's actually managed 150 plus cross-border investigations in over 40 countries, including nearly every Latin American country, Asia Pacific, and Africa. He's a member of the IA's Philadelphia chapter and recipient of the Philadelphia Business Journal's Minority Business Leader Award for efforts in the forensic accounting services industry. So, Nelson, thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, thank you very much, Harold. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for Nelson joining me. He recently authored an amazingly informative piece in collaboration with the IA, the Internal Audit Foundation, and the IA's affiliates in Latin America, affectionately referred to as FLY, entitled A Blueprint to Managing Corporate Fraud Risk During a Pandemic. It's available on the IA's COVID-19 Resource Exchange currently. I got the chance to read the article before it was released and personally found it to be both intuitive and informative. So I'd highly encourage everyone watching to download a copy, consider how it should affect your audit planning, as well as share it with your organizational peers and stakeholders. But I also thought it would be great to have Nelson come here and continue the conversation. So, Nelson, one of the things that you shared in the paper is that you think a perfect fraud storm is brewing. And wondering if you could share what you mean by that.
Sure. And again, wanted to thank you and the Internal Audit Foundation and the Latin America Foundation of Internal Auditors for the opportunity. That's what the crux of the paper is really about, Harold. So what I meant by that in terms of there's a fraud storm is brewing is we're clearly living in unprecedented times right now. Organizations are cutting back on expenses. We're working remotely, as you can see from where my background is right here.
Same here.
Are laying off employees, furloughing employees. So, ultimately fraud is a human issue. And this environment that we're living in is affecting employee morale. So there's a fraud deterrence and detection framework that's well known in the fraud industry, known as the fraud triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And, talks about how there's three components to when fraud occurs. But one is when there is pressure. And clearly right now there is a lot of pressure being put on management to meet financial targets. The second is around opportunity. And you have limited management oversight right now. You have impact on internal controls, reduced budgets. And then thirdly, you have a rationalization where employee psyche may perceive that improper behavior differently under this environment. They might justify their actions because of the environment. So as a result, this pandemic that we're living in right now is fueling all three of these components within the fraud triangle. There's many forensic industry leaders out there that are sounding the alarm bells. And just the FBI, for example, has its own dedicated website around this topic right now. So that's why I'm saying that there's potentially a fraud storm brewing out there because of the environment that we're living in.
Sure, no, that's great. Certainly something which we've heard folks within the profession talk about. There needs to be more emphasis on fraud in the current environment, and a number of, as well as a number of other risks. So could you also share, like you did in the paper, some of the red flags for fraud that we should expect or might be seeing during a pandemic?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously every organization has its own unique risks. So, first within the organization, you want to understand, kind of where you are most susceptible. So you have certain departments, such as accounting and finance, clearly that you could have the opportunity to commit fraud. So first understanding, your vulnerabilities within the organization. And then specific red flags, I'll highlight just a few because of the environment that we're in right now, and the paper covers in more detail, but things like financial statement fraud risk. Mm-hmm. Talked about pressure before, so the pressure to manipulate financial estimates. Sales exactly meeting budget, or expectations when you may not anticipate or expect that right now. Channel stuffing, it could be an area of vulnerability where you have excessive returns after period end quarters. You have the CARES Act, where you have government funding that has occurred at tremendous levels right now, so you could have corruption risk. And then, one that you probably can get around right now that that you're seeing a lot of media attention on is cyber risk. So
Sure.
This is what the FBI has been talking a lot about, and because everyone's working from home, people are particularly vulnerable to this right now. So phishing attacks, business email compromises, those are kind of some of the probably the big ones, Harold, that you want to particularly be looking out for right now.
That's very helpful. So, our audience is primarily made up of internal auditors. What should they be doing now? What should internal audit leaders and members of teams be doing given the fraud storm brewing?
So ultimately the paper, we attempted to provide a practical blueprint as to what internal auditors and others within the organization should be doing. So the first is assessing where the organization is most vulnerable to fraud. So where are those low-hanging fruits? How is the pandemic affecting the employee sentiment and morale? Then secondly, once you kind of have an understanding of where those vulnerabilities are, instituting actual fraud mitigation procedures. So reinforce the hotline, modify specific fraud controls that might be IT focused. How can you adapt the current control environment to the conditions that we're currently living in? The controls are most susceptible. And then thirdly, after you've done that, putting some type of active monitoring, in place for those fraud risks. This paper, we actually have translated it into multiple languages, and we did that for a reason. We did that because many of these risks for those that are in global organizations are very susceptible to the global risk, because this is a worldwide pandemic that we're encountering. So one of the first things that sometimes we notice is that those U.S. multinationals are really focused on their local risks here in the U.S., and they forget about the higher risk regions around the world that you could be even more susceptible and vulnerable to fraud risks. So, I leave you with that we translated the paper because don't lose sight of those global risks that you could be susceptible to. Absolutely,
that's a great point. So Nelson, thank you very much for coming to join me. As you said, the paper was intended to be a practical approach. I found it to be that case, and you got a number of tables which really lay out in bullet points some of the things that people should be looking for and should be doing. And I think that's across all three lines, which is particularly helpful. So thank you very much. Thank you to the foundation and to Fly for sponsoring this paper, which is practical for all internal auditors. We'll continue to put out good content on key risk topics and work with our partners. So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And we very much look forward to seeing you face to face when we can. Have a great day.
Thank you. Be safe.